What we have discovered recently, however, and the strange thing is that not we but our enemies have discovered it, is that not only the first man was born in Africa, but the last man. And within the last 3 years have come out tremendous statements, very shattering, earth-shattering, very revolutionary statements made by Oxford of all places, that they now have proof. As a result of the ability to study mitochondrial DNA in the blood, they now have proof that all man now living on the earth is murdered by one black woman. And that it's not just the first man, because there are 6 stages of man, but the last advanced man on earth was an African, and that the European, the Asiatic, and the African are all anatomically African. They're only superficially pink or superficially brown or superficially having different hair textures, etc. But the brain of man on this planet and the organs of man on this planet are African. It's very important, because that is a major distinction. It's not just a question of man born in Africa. Monkeys were born in Africa too. And that is in fact what people tell you when I was in university. So what? Okay, so that is very important to understand that, because real man as we know him today, appears in Africa about 150,000 years ago. Hominids, that is man-like creatures, appear 3.5 million years ago. But real man, modern man, with the brain case we have now, only appears about 140 to 200,000 years ago in Africa. Then he comes to Europe. There are no Europeans. Africans people Europe. They invade Europe. You can't call it an invasion, because there was nobody there except apes. Okay, and Neanderthal man, which was another stage of African man, which was not yet fully developed. The final fully developed man, which we call the Grimaldi, entered Europe, they say about 55,000 years ago. And then on goes a change which takes about 10,000 years in the ice, when he begins to drop pigmentation and he begins to operate in the ice, first being an albino type and then stabilizing in the ice. Then the Asiatic is a result of a later migration, with migration from Africa nevertheless going into West Asia and spreading out, going up into China and Japan. You find in fact that this story will not only touch on India, it will also touch on China, it will touch on Arabia, and it will touch on 1 or 2 other places. The movement into Asia is tremendously important, because we find that whenever we go back into Asian history, the great civilizations, the Indus Valley civilizations, are Africoid. Now, when they found these skeletons and skulls, there were all sorts of names for them. Let me give you a few of the names, because that is one of the things that was done in Egypt, that when they found the Egyptians, they said they were brown Mediterraneans. They created races for the Egyptians, when in fact, as Diop showed, if you were to take the skulls of the Egyptians and you were to measure it against the skulls in African graves, West or Central Africa, it's the same skulls. But because it was not classically Negroid, all of them, what they call the classical Negro, as Diop shows, there's a range of what we call the Negroid or the Africoid. Let's use the term Africoid. When they make this comparison, they are embarrassed. So they have Chatterjee and Kumar, 2 Indian archaeologists, discovered that the Indians, the early Indians, are the same as the Nubians 5,000 years ago. Well, nobody has any doubt of who the Nubians were 5,000 years ago. They were all black people. Look what the various anthropologists said. Sergi says, these are the same skulls, looking exactly like the Nubians 5,000 years, that they're Mediterranean. Bosch says they're Hamitic. Elliot Smith said they're Proto-Egyptian. Deere said they are Iranic. Fisher said they are Oriental. Lebzetzer said they are Nordoid. I never heard that one before. And Erstedt said they are Indidi, Eastern Mediterranean, or Indeed. Now all of this because they cannot face the black. Because they call themselves Indo-Aryan. Therefore, if the Indian has something to do with them, the black couldn't be in there too. I mean, that's a double embarrassment. It's enough to find the black pushing his head up into Europe, being father of the Caucasoid, and then you go to Asia where they were searching for man until yesterday, and then at the bottom, at the very ground floor of the race, you find another African. So you have, that's the search for name. They're finding all sorts of names to explain this. They can't say European because they know it's not European, so they have to find a name: Hamitic, Iranic, Nordoid, indeed, Mediterranean, Iranic, all sorts of things to escape that fact. Now, why is it important? It is important because, you see, the early Africoid Asiatics in India had established an extraordinary civilization. It is known as the Indus Valley civilization. We have found two of the great cities. They are almost twin cities, Harappa and Mohenjo-Daro. And those cities astonish us. We discover, for example, that although they are 4,000 years old, the cities are built with the same grid-like pattern as Manhattan. The streets are structured like Manhattan. They find also that most of the people lived in 2- and 3-story houses, and that they had these beautiful courtyards, gracious large rooms, and a great central courtyard, and their windows opened on this courtyard. And then they found something which was unknown in Europe until very, very much later. They all had baths with drains leading to central sewage system. They had something which I don't know anyone in this room had. They had trash chutes that would take the trash down through tunnels and send them out into the central sewage system. They had their own private wells. Every house had its own private wells for fresh water. They had shipping docks with sluice gates, unknown in the world at that time. Sluice gates that they could, so that whether it was low tide or high tide, they could bring the ships in, because they were involved in intensive and extensive trading. All of these things. And this they had for some time, until a people, fair-skinned people, nomadic people, described by them as savage people, came in. These are the people who were to call themselves Aryans, and everywhere they conquered, they were to call it Aryavata, the land of the whites. Okay? And they attacked these people whom they call the Dasas, the Dasias or the Dasas, whom they described as dark, bull-lipped, and snub-nosed. Now, this battle went on for a long time, because even though, and this is something that a lot of people don't seem to understand, they think that because a country or a nation or a people are defeated, it means a superior people has defeated them. That is not true. Genghis Khan was not superior to the people he defeated. Certainly not. Genghis Khan's vast hordes ranged wild, smashing everything before it. He was a barbarian. A barbarian is more likely to succeed than a civilized person, because a civilized person may pause. They may have a certain morality. They may wonder about whether they should kill or not kill. But if you're mad or barbaric, you pause at nothing. The most successful invaders are those who are savage. They don't even know what civilization is. The Persians, for example, on the Cambyses smashed everything, erased everything to the ground, all the statues, all the temples, all the palaces, all the beautiful things that were built were razed to the ground. Same way the Aryans went marching through, smashing everything. The slaughters were tremendous. We have found the skeletons, masses of skeletons, butchered with their heads cut off and legs and arms. This is thousands of years later we have found these skeletons. So you could understand the kind of rage and savagery of these nomads sweeping across into India. Now, It was not only in these Indus Valley civilizations that you have the movement of the Great Black. The Great Black is also found in Mesopotamia. Now, Mesopotamia, which is referred to as Babylon, etc. in the Bible, is not a black place. It has a major black element. It has Asiatics, it has blacks. It may also have a few Europeans, but the black emerged there with great force because we have evidence. For example, when we go to cities, there are Mesopotamia has great cities. Sumer, Elam, Susa, etc. have very great cities. And when we go to these great cities, we have found evidence of a major black presence. Like, for example, the governor Gudea. And by the way, you will see some slides at the end of this talk. I do not have them all, unfortunately. You must get the book. All the things I talk about here today and all the pictures, not only the slides you see, but far more than those slides, are found in the book. But in Sumer, it was dominated by people who call themselves the Blackheads. Now listen to this. They call themselves the Blackheads. You know what the European historian said? The reason why they call themselves the Blackheads is because they had black hair. Now all the people had black hair. This was not a European country. You could go right across India, you could go right across China. Almost everybody has black hair. So why would somebody pick out that as a title? And then these people built a tremendous civilization there. We have this governor Gudea who is extremely powerful. And we find that he was able to do extraordinary things there. He built a great city there. And then it was attacked eventually. The blacks were eventually attacked by the Aryans. Now this is the first meeting recorded between whites and blacks. This is what the blacks say of the whites at that stage. The Martu who know no grain. They're not cultivators yet. The Martu who know no house or tongue. The boors of the mountains. They're nomads. The Martu who does not bend to cultivate the land, who eats raw meat, who has no house during his lifetime, who is not buried after his death. Because most of the Europeans did not bury because they were running from place to place. Africans, in fact, the Grimaldi were the first to introduce burial of humans in Europe. Because those before them, like the Neanderthals, who were not complete, and then the later nomadic tribes in Europe, they burnt things. They burnt, or they just threw it away, or they burnt the bodies, but they did not build graves. The Grimaldi were the first to build graves in Europe.